At the conclusion of the NATO summit, the G7 decided to provide security guarantees to Ukraine. President Biden said that Ukrainian President Zelensky understands that once there is a security commitment, whether or not Ukraine joins NATO is not important anymore. It's like a man saying to his girlfriend, as long as I buy you a bag, shoes, and clothes, it doesn't matter if we get married or not. Of course, it doesn't matter because he has already allocated half of the wedding budget. President Zelensky considers the G7 security guarantee as a great victory, and says that NATO and the G7 have provided unprecedented support to Ukraine. It's like your potential girlfriend suddenly receiving attention from 7 millionaires, and she might think, I don't need to join anyone's family as long as they promise to buy me bags, shoes, and clothes. However, Zelensky emphasized that Ukraine still seeks to join NATO. It's like saying, although I like that you all buy me bags, I still hope to have a sense of belonging. After all, it's really tiring to go shopping with 7 bags alone. And what about Russia's attitude? It's like a man observing his love interest suddenly becoming interested in another guy. They say, this behavior could have a negative impact on me, it's a security violation. Ha! It's like seeing your love interest receive a bouquet of flowers from your rival, and you start shouting, this is a violation of my personal dignity. Buddy, are you sure it's not because you didn't think of giving her flowers first? Regardless, we only hope for a more peaceful world, whether that peace comes from the G7 security guarantees, Ukraine joining NATO, NATO's ambiguity, or even President Zelensky's new toy in his hands. Sergei Naryshkin, the head of Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service, SVR, recently stated that he had a 1-hour phone call with William Burns, the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. You know, there are only 2 types of people who spend an hour on the phone in this world: teenagers in love and intelligence agency directors. And this time, they weren't talking sweet nothings, they were discussing Ukraine. You see, this is the world's political version of Romeo and Juliet. On the other end of the phone line, they whispered into the dark night sky, darling, what action do you think we should take regarding the situation in Ukraine? Interestingly, the United States had previously claimed that any negotiations about Ukraine must involve Ukrainians, but this phone call obviously didn't involve Ukraine. It's like telling your friend, if you want to date my girlfriend, I have to be present. Then you find out they had a secret conversation for an hour, and you can only smile bitterly, saying, when I said, I have to be present, I actually meant don't secretly date when I'm not around. The CIA has refused to comment on the content of this call, like a child caught with their hand in the cookie jar when their mother asks, why did you sneakily eat cookies? They can only remain silent because they know that whatever they say will be wrong. Naryshkin also mentioned that a face-to-face meeting with Burns is still a possibility. This is like a boy hinting to a girl, although our phone dates are fun, I would prefer to have a real date. What I want to say is, when you see these major world events, you can try to look at them from a lighthearted and humorous perspective. After all, world politics is like a huge comedy stage, and we are all spectators in the audience, enjoying the show. North Korean state media claimed that Kim Jong-un personally supervised and guided the launch of an intercontinental ballistic missile. Do you know how North Korea announced this news? They said, the launch of this intercontinental ballistic missile shook the entire Earth. This is not the first time they have said something like this. They have always been telling us that they are shaking the world. I'm starting to think that there must be a giant earthquake generator beneath their launch platform, and as soon as the missile is launched, they can't wait to press that big red button, making the seismographs go crazy. Then they say, look, we shook the entire Earth. The missile is called HWASONG-18. What a grand name, it sounds like they want to launch a rocket to Mars. I checked, and Mars is about 225 million kilometers away from Earth, while the maximum flight altitude of this missile is only 4,100 miles, which is about 6,600 kilometers. In that case, if they really want to reach Mars, they might need to attach a fuel tank carrying fuel to the missile, and then another fuel tank on that fuel tank. In the end, the missile might turn into a huge Russian nesting doll. It is said that Kim Jong-un supervised the launch while wearing a white suit. I started to think that it must be to prevent him from getting covered in black smoke during the rocket launch. But actually, I think he should wear a radiation suit and a space helmet so that after the rocket launch, he can jump directly onto the rocket and fly to Mars, becoming the first North Korean leader to land on Mars. I also heard that to prevent the missile from flying over Japan and entering the Pacific, North Korea launched its intercontinental ballistic missile on a steep trajectory. I started to think that they should find a better missile flight coach. Maybe they can borrow some players from the National Basketball Association, NBA, in the United States to give their missiles a shooting lesson. I bet if their missiles could really fly like a basketball, from one end of the court to the other, not only Japan can be at ease, but Americans would also applaud them. However, I have to admit that Kim Jong-un's performance is truly fascinating. He is like a magician, always holding a magic wand in his hand, and that magic wand is his missile. Every time he waves the magic wand, we see flames, smoke, and warheads. I just hope that the next time he waves the magic wand, he can conjure something else, like peace, prosperity, or at least a white dove. Czech literary master Milan Kundera, the guy who wrote The Unbearable Lightness of Being, passed away in Paris at the age of 94. 94 years old. If that were in my family, my mom would have been urging me to have great-grandchildren by now. Interestingly, Kundera's novels always make you feel like you're drinking a glass of whiskey on the rocks, simultaneously cool and fiery. But you have to sip it slowly, otherwise if you gulp it down, you might need to see a therapist. Kundera, his works are a perfect combination of depth and sensuality. You know, his novels always have some sexual undertones. Those passages and plots are like beautiful flowers blooming in the universe, attracting everyone. Well, I admit I'm exaggerating. In reality, his novels are more like a neon-lit bar you see on the streets of Paris, filled with desire and sin, yet also with depth and warmth of human nature. His novels are filled with absurdity and depth, and you might wonder how these two can come together. But he manages to do it, just like how I can have coffee and fried eggs together for breakfast. I know it might sound disgusting to you, but trust me, I can really do it. So, if you haven't read Kundera's novels yet, I strongly recommend you to give them a read. You might be startled by his words, or you might be amazed by his insights, but I guarantee you, no matter the outcome, you won't regret it. Because, just like Kundera's life, although filled with contradictions and challenges, he ultimately became the giant of the unbearable lightness of being in our hearts. A rare first edition of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone was sold at an auction for £10,500, while its owner originally purchased it for only 30 pence. This first edition of the book had only 500 copies, and one was acquired by a collector from Staffordshire, UK, who passed away earlier this year. Ukrainian officials reported that Iranian-made Witnesser drones launched a large-scale attack on Kyiv during the night, coming from different directions and causing at least one fatality. Kyiv claims to have destroyed 20 drones and 2 cruise missiles during the night. On the 12th, Ukraine announced plans to escalate the situation on the southern front lines and specified the geographic range for the use of cluster bombs obtained from the United States. A senior Russian official warned that with the West providing weapons to Ukraine, especially cluster munitions, the Third World War is imminent. Meanwhile, the New York Times quoted a U.S. official stating that the Biden administration is considering providing long-range ground-to-ground missiles to Kyiv. Russian Defense Minister Shoigu threatened on the 11th that if the U.S. provides cluster bombs to the Ukrainian army, then the Russian military will also use cluster bombs. On the other hand, Ukraine accuses the Russian military of launching missile attacks on Kyiv, Odessa, and Kherson. U.S. President Biden recently stated that this year's NATO summit is a historic moment, and the entry of Finland and Sweden into NATO is significant. U.S. media reports suggest that during the NATO summit, Biden will have one-on-one bilateral meetings with Ukrainian President Zelensky and Turkish President Erdogan. Erdogan previously refused Sweden's entry into NATO, citing its insufficient efforts in combating extremist groups. South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol delivered a speech at the NATO summit on the 12th, stating that the security of Europe and Asia is inseparable and that South Korea will expand military intelligence sharing with NATO. Yoon accepted NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg's proposal to join NATO's Battlefield Information Collection and Development System and exchange military secrets with NATO member countries. Yoon also emphasized that South Korea sees NATO as an important partner in its Indo-Pacific strategy. The plan to discharge nuclear wastewater in Fukushima, Japan has sparked significant controversy. Although Japan has repeatedly emphasized that the discharge of nuclear wastewater meets environmental safety standards, it has failed to alleviate the fears of some people regarding the unknown impacts. It is uncertain whether nuclear wastewater will become a major threat to the environment, but how to ensure that the global environment does not deteriorate further is a question that every country needs to face. North Korea claimed that it intercepted a U.S. strategic reconnaissance aircraft with its jet fighters, alleging that the reconnaissance aircraft violated North Korea's exclusive economic zone airspace. The U.S. and South Korea denied the claim. Some security experts and the South Korean military believe that North Korea's decision to focus on these flight activities may indicate its intention to create a pretext for launching military provocations. Thai Prime Minister Prayuth Chan-o-cha, who faced defeat after nearly a decade in power, will step down from politics. The caretaker Prime Minister of Thailand, Prayuth, stated that he will withdraw from politics. His efforts to continue his nearly decade-long rule failed in the elections held in May. As the Prime Minister, I have been committed to protecting this country, our religion, and the monarchy, and working for the welfare of the beloved people. From now on, I will withdraw from politics. Japan's largest travel agency, analyzed customer bookings for overseas travel destinations between July 21 and August 31. The results showed that Seoul ranked first, while Honolulu, Hawaii slipped to second place this year. With the Japanese yen reaching a historical low, the cost of overseas travel has continued to increase, leading Japanese people to shift towards domestic travel or choose neighboring countries. Alphabet's Google announced on Thursday that it will launch its AI chatbot, Bard, in the European Union. Google also stated that Bard will be launched in Brazil. Google mentioned that besides the new launch locations, Bard will now allow users to upload images, among other adjustments. The UK's antitrust regulator announced on Wednesday that it would need to conduct a new investigation for any changes made to the Microsoft acquisition of Activision Blizzard in order to gain approval. The regulator did not disclose how long the investigation would take, but any investigation could make it difficult for Microsoft to complete the acquisition of Activision Blizzard by its self-imposed deadline of July 18. As the tech industry competes to develop new artificial intelligence projects, Musk has launched his new AI company, xAI. The company stated that it has recruited industry-experienced professionals from Google, Microsoft, OpenAI, and Tesla. From the perspective of AI software architecture, NVIDIA's competitors may have the ability to challenge NVIDIA. NVIDIA's software is proprietary, which means that software developers cannot freely adjust it. Intel and AMD offer open-source alternatives, and some customers may find this choice appealing. The Walt Disney Company is exploring strategic options for its subsidiary Star India, including joint ventures or selling the business. This is a sign of pressure on one of the major businesses acquired from Fox. The U.S. Department of Labor announced on Wednesday that the Consumer Price Index in the United States rose 3% year-on-year in June, a much lower increase compared to the recent peak of 9.1% in June 2022 and lower than 4% in May. The last time the inflation rate approached 3% was in March 2021. Record-breaking heat waves and heavy rainfall have been hitting various parts of the world, causing casualties and property damage. Some regions in Europe have experienced scorching heat up to 48 degrees Celsius, while concentrated heavy rains have affected North America and parts of Asia, leading to states of emergency. There are warnings that these abnormal weather patterns may persist until next year due to global warming. Does soy milk increase the risk of breast cancer? Are fat-free foods healthier than high-fat foods? Do vegetarians lack protein? There are various misconceptions about nutrition in daily life. Here are some iconic misconceptions. People believe that plant-based milk, such as oat, almond, rice, and hemp milk, is more nutritious than cow's milk. This is incorrect, according to Catherine Meiden, a professor of sustainable food systems at Arizona State University. Take protein, for example. Typically, a cup of cow's milk contains about 8 grams of protein, while almond milk typically contains about 1 to 2 grams of protein per cup, and oat milk typically contains about 2 to 3 grams of protein per cup. Hello everyone, I'm your news anchor Yali, providing you with a one-stop service for global news every day. Feel free to leave comments in the comment section, and we will carefully read and respond to your comments. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. See you next time, take care everyone.